My name is Emily Wells. Welcome to the Language of the Heart podcast, a podcast that explores artists, their creative process, and the journey of expression in its truest form. I have with me here Gerardo, our co-host, if you want to take over the rest of the introductions.
Yes, and today we have the wonderful Nauzanin Knight, writer, director, producer, and owner of 1844 Studios. That's right.
That's right.
Got you.
Great
Awesome.
to be here.
Yes. Thank you so much for opening up your home, your space. It's very lovely. Very nice to be here.
Thank you for joining me. This is awesome.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to start a bit before we dive into you and what you do in your art. Actually, maybe I was really curious about 1844. I like that name, but I was always like, where did that come from? Maybe just we can touch base there. Where did that name come from?
Sure. Well, 1844 Studios or 1844 comes from the beginning of the Bahá'í Faith. I'm a Baha'i myself, and that number just has a potency to me that I really wanted to bring that into my company and start from there.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Amazing. And I like to lead these podcasts with the fullest name introduction. So if you don't mind, maybe introducing as yourself, your fullest name, and if there is a meaning also behind your name, because I find it's a very beautiful name. And I think from there we can kind of dive into your origins, maybe growing up in Edmonton or wherever you were raised.
So my name is Nauzanin Knight, or Nauzanin Knight. That's my full name. Atash means fire in Persian, and Nauzanin, it can't be translated into English, but it means something like lovely or kind or sweet. And then Knight is a very popular Barbadian name. My dad is from Barbados and my mom is from Iran, so I feel like a mix of the two worlds.
Right. Yeah. That's such a cool name. It's so nice. So yeah, sorry. I don't know. Wait, was there more to that? You said your name meaning, but then sorry, what else? I interrupted.
Oh, I don't know. The fire. That was very similar to Karima's thing with the first name being I think warrior, and then her middle name being benevolent, but that contrast between fire and kind. I don't know. I wonder if that comes out in your work. And I'm curious where you grew up as a starting point, because in Alberta, I feel it's particularly challenging to even consider film until you've been a part of it in your life. It's not something that you get into, but how long have you been doing film for, and how did you get into it in this environment?
It's a good question. I mean, I haven't been doing film for that long, but I've been writing for a long time. I'm originally from Toronto, and then I lived for many years in Quebec before moving to Edmonton with my family when my dad became a professor at the University of Alberta. And I think throughout that whole time, I'd been writing and exploring creative writing, but I hadn't gotten into writing scripts until much later. I think I wrote my first script when we moved to Trinidad. And I just remember feeling really distant from my culture in Canada, and I just wanted to explore that. And I think I explored it through script writing for the first time, and I realized, wow, this comes easier to me than writing long form, novels or poetry. It just seemed to make sense, and from there I got into filmmaking.
Wow.
Yeah.
I literally have goosebumps.
I know
hearing
that
process.
That was incredible. I mean, I kind of want to pause a second because there's 1,000 places we can ask questions here. I want to know before we even started rolling, she was like, yeah, when I lived in Israel, and then when I lived and she lived many places. So I want to get some sense of that timeline. But before we go there, I do want to spend a bit of time in those formative years in Toronto. So you were born and raised in Toronto, is that right?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Toronto. I moved to Quebec when I was 6. And so I spent a lot of time with my mom's side because my mom's family always lived in Toronto. So, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and they're Persian speaking. They really didn't speak a lot of English. And so I really got acquainted with that side of my culture. And it wasn't until a lot later that I became acquainted with my Caribbean side that, I had a chance to live in Barbados and Trinidad. And so it wasn't until much later in my life that I got to do that. But I think, I just remember my formative years being filled with so much love from my grandparents and my aunt and uncle, and that same kind of chaotic Persian or Middle Eastern style of family life, lots of food, lots of love, lots of tea, lots of sugar.
How many people lived in one house?
Well, it was just me, my brother, and my mom and my dad in one house, but we were always at my grandma's place, and that was like a hub for the family.
In that time, did you also like learn Persian? Did you learn French as well, being in Quebec?
Well, Persian, yes, Persian. It was actually the first language that I learned how to speak, even before English. And so it's been a process of steadily forgetting that over time. I think same goes with French. I must have been able to speak French quite well living in Quebec for a little while, but definitely forgot that.
Really?
Definitely.
Wow, that's crazy.
I still understand though. Yeah.
How, what's the age difference between your brother and, like, were you always, would you say, like, writing as a kid? Do you remember your earliest experience, like, writing?
I remember, like, I would always tell stories. I would always tell stories, really crazy stories, but I didn't actually get to writing stories until I think I was in junior high. And I just didn't see it as something that I would do. I don't think I even saw it as something that was possible for me to do. And then one day I just sat down, started with poetry, and then went into short form writing, and then later into longer and longer forms.
Wow.
Yeah. And my brother, sorry, going back to that question, my brother is 2 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any other siblings or just the one brother?
Just the one brother, yeah.
Oh, nice. That's a good bond.
Yeah, a good bond, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Does he live in Edmonton or no?
He lives in Vancouver now. He has his own business there, and yeah, he's always trying to get me to move over there, and there's still so many reasons to, but I love Edmonton as well.
Got you.
Yeah.
I feel very much the same.
Yeah.
I'm questioning, like, what do you love about Edmonton?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Edmonton still feels like home to me. I moved around a lot. I think you've heard that, but Edmonton, I've lived in Edmonton the longest period of my life, and it really does feel like home. This house feels like home. I do love farmland. And Edmonton is surrounded with it. I love going out into the nature, and Edmonton is a beautiful place. I mean, yeah, there are some barriers to get into film here, but it still feels like home.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, to me, it's a lot of nature. Yeah. It's a lot of people. I mean, my family and friends and such. So it'd be something similar.
The cold winters are brutal. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone.
Man.
I personally love them. I was born in December, and I love being out there. Again, like I love that. Like I love the feeling of like I have to survive to get home. It's just like it's that simple. It's like it's minus 40 out. Everything is freezing, but if I get home, it's like an accomplishment. I don't know. I also love the cold, even though it is.
I'm an August baby.
Oh yeah, summertime. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail that.
But. No, I get there's a lot of beauty in the winter. I see that like when the sunlight reflects off of the snow and it still hasn't been touched, it's really special. Or when you see the northern lights come over, and that was one of my first like memories of coming to Edmonton, the northern lights coming over, and just remembering that's magical. Yeah,
Sorry, I just have I'm just bursting with questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Especially there's so much in your timeline, but on the flip side of this cold winter weather, how did you find Trinidad?
Oh, Trinidad. Again, it was my dad moving. He had another job he became the director of an Institute of International Relations at UWI in Trinidad. And that was just before I did my master's. So I just, I went with my family there. And then from there, I moved and I did my master's. So moving again, I spent a year and a half in England doing my master's.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Goodness. Incredible.
At the City College? No. University College. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's called?
University College London. Yeah.
Wait. Yeah, there's so much. There's so much. Wait. I want to kind of step a tiny bit back in timeline. So from Quebec to Alberta, how old were you? What was that transition like?
Alberta, I moved here in grade 3.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was young. I felt like I was leaving behind all my friends and everything that I knew. And I arrived here, and I think, how can I describe that? It was really different. Gosh, the culture is different from Quebec to Alberta. And it was another sense of getting used to another way of life. But I think I just got used to doing that because we did it so many times. Yeah, I remember one of my first experiences in Edmonton is just realizing there's not a lot of diversity here. I don't know.
Wow.
It was in 1998 or so, and I think I was one of 2 or 3 black kids in my school, and I think that was one of the first things that I remembered. Because coming from Toronto is so diverse, and this was really different. So I think people tried to explore and learn about me. They were curious about who I was and where I came from. I think I constantly felt like I had to explain that in different ways. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I got into storytelling. Who knows? But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was born and raised in Edmonton, and in school, I never really took a stat of how many cultural or ethnic kids there were compared to white kids. But thinking back, it was very low. It's 2, 3 at max in a classroom. And it never struck me as odd until you hear some other experiences, similar. That's it's just kind of eye-opening. It's interesting. So you're here in Alberta, here in Edmonton, and you pretty much go through junior high and high school here as well. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it isn't until, say, the university level when you start moving around, going to, say, Trinidad or London?
Yeah. I did my undergrad here at the U of A.
Okay.
And then after that, we started moving around a bit more.
And what was that undergrad?
What did you study?
Yeah.
I did psychology with a sociology minor. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Nice. Wait, what year were you at the U of A?
Oh my gosh, that's one thing I'm very bad at is remembering what year.
1844 is the only year
that is the only year.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was just curious because I was there from 2008 until 2014.
We overlapped for sure.
No way.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Oh, we also overlapped with another dear friend of ours and friend of the podcast and friend of Edmonton film in general, Edmund Rotea.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shout out to Edmund.
Definitely. Hello, Edmund.
Hello. Beautiful soul.
So yeah, there's probably a lot to ask about there in how you grew in your storytelling and your writing. Well, maybe it's best to just ask the creative writing. Where did you feel like that was where you wanted to pursue even in post-secondary?
Well, creative writing, I mentioned I started with poetry, and it was, I think, I'm a very quiet person. I think writing was a way of feeling like I have a voice, and I actually realizing how much I had to say, and so I started with poetry, which is really, expressing my experience, expressing my emotions, expressing the way that I see the world. And then I fell in love with short stories, and I started going in that direction, and the stories started getting longer and longer. So throughout my undergrad, I was writing short stories, and then in my time, in the Caribbean, I was writing scripts, and then when I went to London, I wrote a novel, and more scripts, and now pretty much I only write scripts, but yeah, it started pretty early, I would say. Yeah.
No, there's so many questions to go there.
There's so many questions.
Because I want to ask about like the novel, and I read a little bit about what it was. And sorry,
something that pops to mind is like, is there any like specific piece like of work, or even like a teacher who maybe like catapulted like this interest, or was it like a collection of work that you can point to?
I'll mention two things. The Baha'i writings are extremely poetic, just extremely poetic. And there's this concept of the mother word that basically gives birth to new forms, an infinite number of forms of words. And I think the Baha'i writings and studying them early on in my life just made me really appreciate the playfulness and the poetic nature of language. Like, I just love the sound of language, and I love the way that it's rhythmic, and that that you can express an infinite number of concepts. Like, that just to me is mind-boggling. It's something that I always was passionate about. And then later on in life, let's see, it must have been an undergraduate English teacher that mentioned voice, the voice of a writer, and that you can take on different personas and different voices. And I just, that was something that changed the way that I could go forward with writing, because I just explored different voices. And you can hear different voices from different characters, and what they would sound like, how they would interact. And so, yeah, I think we're in a very visual field, but actually that auditory, it is really an inspiration for me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like, we were having a struggle coming up with the title, and I was reading some poetry from Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese poet, and I was like, language of the heart. So that's where that origin comes from. And then there was like these beautiful words and phrases around it. And I was like, yes, like I think art is that like universal language that's coming from a very authentic and true place. And yeah, I love what you had to say about voice. And it can be scary, I feel, as a visual artist and as a writer to speak. Like I have that all the time. I can't believe I'm doing a podcast. Thank you, Gerardo, for dragging me into this. You didn't drag me in. I like literally dragged you in.
I pay her.
Yeah. I wish. But yeah, so it's like with writing, you can like edit yourself, and you can like explore kind of more differences without being judged right away.
That's so true. So true. Yeah.
May I ask, and I mean, this will probably help a lot of listeners. I'm very ignorant. I actually was watching your films before coming, and I watched the one about the Baha'i community in Edmonton, and I realized, I'm like, oh, okay, I've heard of that, but I don't even know what it is. So can you just like maybe explain and break it down for me? Because I'm ignorant.
Well, the Bahá'í Faith is a world religion. It started in Iran in 1844. The messenger that we believe, is the prophet for this religion, Baha'u'llah. He revealed his mission in 1863, which is another year that is important to me. The basic teachings of the Baha'i Faith are things like the equality of men and women, the oneness of humanity, which is kind of the pivotal force of the religion, the equality of the races, the need for an international tribunal to govern the affairs of humanity, So some of the ways that you see the Baha'i faith manifested now in the communities is really through grassroots, programs to help build community. So children's classes, junior youth empowerment programs, devotional gatherings where people come together and pray, but also consult about the needs of their community. And also some study circles for adults to try to apply the writings to how they can better humanity from the grassroots.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. I mean, so one of the videos that I saw, as I mentioned, was like the Baha'i community in Edmonton, and I kind of had some curiosities about like why you chose to do it. I mean, that sounds very, very simple. Of course, you're like passionate about it, but I guess what I'm asking is, how did that project come to be?
Well, that project, it was just before the bicentenary, major bicentenary for the Baha'i Faith, which is the bicentenary of the Bab, key figure of the Baha'i Faith, and so I wanted to do a project to really, that I could dedicate to that time, which was significant for the Baha'is, and it was screened at the bicentenary event in Edmonton.
Oh, cool.
And so it was a wonderful experience to get to combine filmmaking and the community activities that we're involved in.
Right. Yeah. I only wanted to comment on it because so my own personal background is from a Christian faith, right? I was kind of raised in an evangelical church, and I kind of have been going to church, like a non-denominational church, Christian church, for most of my life. And just seeing this video, of course, at first I was like, oh, I don't know what Baha'i is. Very foolish and ignorant of me.
But honestly haven't heard of it either.
Right, okay.
Very ignorant myself, too.
And I, obviously, like my own watching it, I was kind of like, comparing, okay, how is this compared to Christianity? It's just kind of what my mind was going to. But what I loved was just, I think there was like more similarities that I felt in like the wanting to create community, coming together. There was like, I wrote a couple notes about like some quotes that you had on there. And one I think was from, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it right, but it's like how do you pronounce that?
Baha'u'llah.
Baha'u'llah, yes. Yeah. You had a quote there as part of it I just loved was like, to be concerned about the age ye live in, right? And I felt like, and I just wrote under that, I was like, that's like Naz's credo. Like I feel like the work you put yourself to is to like be part of what's going on now. And so like I just like seeing the communities in that video, it was like, some gathering of people, music, there's prayer, there's communal food. I was like, wow. I was like, yeah, there's like more similarities here than just me being like, what is the Baha'i faith? I was like, oh, these are like, they almost felt like distant cousins or something like that, right? I was like, it was a very cool, warm feeling. I didn't mean to like harp on that too much, but I liked it a lot.
I mean, that's interesting. The Baha'is believe that all religions are one, that the foundation is really one. And so that religion shouldn't really be the cause of dissension and strife. That actually, if you go back to the texts themselves, you'll see that there's more in common than what's different. And, at the basis of all religions is really love and compassion for your fellow man, fellow woman. So that's kind of, I totally agree with you there. Yeah,
there's so many like religions that go back to that oneness, and that we can't like fully like reach our full potential without bringing everyone with us to heal. Yeah. So that's really just beautiful.
Yeah, if I could just share my own musings about like where I currently am, I think a lot of my own, I wouldn't say I'm struggling with my own faith, but I'm struggling with how I'm living that out. And so a lot of my own actions, this is not to be critical of like the Christian church and blah, 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 and wherever I was going, but a lot of my own actions I've been evaluating being like, how am I living? Like if I were to look at my life now, how am I bringing along someone that's in need of help, right? To kind of bring them up to a similar spot where I would be. And I had an honest look at myself, and I honestly, before COVID and before everything shut down, I was looking at my life and I was like, I'm really just like living for myself to get by. Even though I still volunteer, even though I'm like my life's work is not for others. And I guess that's as simple as I can put it. But yeah, I mean, even just seeing that video about the Baha'i Faith, it was a really good encouragement. It was like, oh, like, hey, like, you know, I don't have to be so down on myself about that. Like, there's still great community out there.
Exactly.
You know? That was really nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like making work for others. I feel like you've done that. I'm not sure if you want to talk about a piece of yours that you feel like best dives into that, like creating work for others.
Well, I think all of my projects, really, I try to do that. Like I genuinely try with 1844 Studios to bring in diverse filmmakers into different projects, and I try to create a situation where more experienced filmmakers are paired with less experienced filmmakers. So it's not just creating work for others, but also like raising up new talent and fresh blood in the community. And I think that's really important because everybody has a voice, and voices shouldn't be excluded from filmmaking. That's how we open people's eyes to what's happening in the communities, what's happening in the world. So I think, with 1844 Studios, kind of right from the get-go, that was one of the missions of the company, and I really try to uphold that going forward.
Yeah, that's incredible, because to me it just kind of harkens back to the question of like, why Edmonton? You know, like, why do you like Edmonton so much? And I think that now, like 2020, it is quite diversified. There are a lot of more like prominent communities and pockets, but they don't always have like an access to connect to, say, like an artistic stream like filmmaking, you know, like they wouldn't even know that. So it's crazy that like that would be the work of your heart and of your life, you know. That's so admirable.
Oh, thanks. Well, you know, like filmmaking is so expensive. It's an expensive craft to get involved in, and that's why, you know, that's why people have been excluded from it. It's a very risk adverse industry. So when people think, well, someone who doesn't have the same amount of experience is trying to break in, well, that's a risk. It's a risk to fund their projects. It's a risk to bring them on when you have to make your days. So I think really producers need to look at, you know, how they can bring in new people, and without, you know, to mitigate the risk, but still bring in new people. And one of those ways is definitely shadowing, mentorship, but also just giving people credit where credit is due. People are capable of learning. Nobody has experience on the first day. So, you know, somebody has to give somebody a shot, and hopefully, you know, not just my production company, but other production companies pick that up.
I want to take like a mini step back. I want to know about your experiences starting in the film industry here in Edmonton. What was like one of your first film experiences on set, and what was your role, if you could describe that?
Oh man. Well, my first film was My Lyric I Never Knew in Edmonton.
Oh, no way.
That was my first film.
Okay.
Yeah, and my first
Wow. Holy
project.
I'm so sorry. It all hit me like a wave. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Wow. Okay. No, go ahead. Well, I'll dig into it. Continue. My bad.
And well, I mean, I think you plan a project, and at the beginning, you're so naive about all of the logistical elements that go into making a film, and I think that really benefits you at the beginning, that naivety, because you know, I just went for it. I took a piece of advice that Katrina Beatty mentioned at a workshop that I happened to attend. She said, hire people better than yourself and just make your film. And that's what I did. I hired people who had, you know, really great experience, and they came onto the project supporting me for free, you know, and that's Edmonton for you. That's what Edmonton is such an altruistic community. And I wouldn't have been able to make that project, you know, if it wasn't for the support of these people. Because it's true that I had studied, and in theory I knew what I was doing, but without these really experienced crew and cast, that project wouldn't have happened the way that it did. I'm so grateful to my cast and crew for that.
Right. Yeah. So that was one of the ones I saw. Sorry, Emily, were you gonna?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the ones I saw on your Vimeo page. So if anyone's watching or listening, please do go watch that. Maybe we can link it.
Sure. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So my lyric, I never knew. It was striking to me because it was like not outright what you'd think a music video would be, and not just outright what a narrative would be. It's something in between, which first off, like not a lot of people even try to do. So once I like kind of felt that, I was like, oh, this is like a unique experience. And so that's why like earlier I was like, wait, what? That was like your first film? Like that's your first experience going into it?
Yeah.
I just had a couple of notes and I wanted to ask a few things.
Sure.
So a lot of, I don't know if you've seen it, Emily. Have you gotten a chance to check it out or no? Okay, that's okay. That's okay. You can.
I'm gonna check out all the videos after though.
You can go into it now after having talked to the source, so it's even better. So it starts out. I love it because it's actually just pure cinema at the beginning. It's just images, and then there's sound, of course, and some score, but it's just like imagery. And I think like that first of all was like very bold because a lot of people I was honestly, my first thought, and I don't mean to be mean here, but my first thought was like, okay, I can't wait for like crappy audio to kick in. And like, that's just like what I get from most people's first endeavors. But, this was like, it was focused on the image and the cinema. And you did a great thing of like, kind of cutting back and forth between like a previous experience and then the current experience. And usually that's not like really effective or it's done poorly. But in this case, it was like, oh, okay, I can see this actually building to something unique. So I already had like my attention was drawn to like the care of the cinematic image, right? And it looks great. Like it looks beautiful. Like again, you hired like great people to get it on done. And who did you hire, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, definitely. Chase Gardner shot that one. Andrea Clark was the production designer.
Cool.
And just Olivia Morley did hair and makeup. It was just an amazing crew. And they just, I just can't thank them enough for that experience. It was just, I will never forget that experience.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to them because they did incredible.
Yeah.
And shout out to you. I feel like you're so humble because you've like just even like briefly mentioning you did your master's in London, which I'm not sure what you did, and that you wrote a novel in London.
I know. Like we have to go back to that, but like we're going to like time jump a bit. So yeah, because I was struggling with like, oh, should I ask about her projects now or like go into that? But we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Because there's like a whole world that we haven't described. The one thing I wanted to ask you about that music video was why was there an intentional choice of like no dialogue? We even have a few scenes where we're seeing people talk, but it's just like silent. And then the first thing we hear are the lyrics of this song. What made you go that way?
Well, first of all, I this was one of actually the only project that I storyboarded before I scripted. It's based on someone that I knew, someone who I had the chance to work with at iHuman. Just a wonderful, wonderful soul. And she had a very traumatic experience. And it always stuck with me, and I wanted to write a happy ending to her story. And she was such a musical gift, really. And so I wanted the main character to be the same. And I remember she could really kind of only express her experience through music fully. Otherwise, she was a little bit reserved about her story. I kind of heard it through other people. And that was the inspiration for the half silence, where she's going back and forth between the present day and having these basically post-traumatic flashbacks to her past. And that was the reason for using kind of graphic matches between what was happening in the present and what was happening in the past. And then the first moment that kicks in with with sound is her steps on the stage, and then her song to the daughter that she never knew. So that was kind of the reason. It was inspired by reality and somebody that I knew and someone that affected me. Yeah.
Oh,
Wow. I didn't know you also like either worked or volunteered at iHuman, but
yeah, I worked there for a while before. I think it was before I went to university, I think. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I spent a summer working there. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've heard great things about that. I had a friend, I think, who volunteered there. But yeah, they're great. And what would you consider them? Like an Edmonton? I don't know.
It's like an art studio. But
Okay.
now they've really expanded. When I was there, it was just, I think it was fine art. They did lots of spray painting. That was a big draw there. And then hip hop music. So I was working with them in the studio to help record their music. And yeah, I think that was it. Now they have fashion design and all sorts of things. It's an amazing place.
Wow, that's cool.
I think it's like having like those resources and a space to be creative for people who are at risk,
Right.
of it's so challenging, I think, for sure, with like expression and having the tools to express yourself is like such an important outlet, because if you don't have it, it gets channeled inwards in depression often, or outwards in like violence or frustration, because there isn't that way, or like you never learn that way to channel. But I just loved what you said. And I also like personally I'm obsessed to digress a bit here about like the etymology of words. And like, for example, the word dumb means, in our modern context, I think we think of someone who's just like not able to keep up or not in with it. But I think the original context is like to be robbed of speech and to be like have your speech stolen, which I find very like interesting, like to give back voice, and to like explore like why someone may be silent, and like the complex kind of building blocks that lead to silence.
I just thought of the
So
word
interesting.
dumbfounded,
Yeah.
right? When you think of that word, that's what it means. Like you don't have words. The words have been taken away.
Right.
That's cool.
That's so interesting.
Language.
Yeah, do you ever have like writer's block, or what's your writing process
boy.
like?
Yeah,
great
I get writer's block for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, I do. I think, how do I get out of writer's block? I think I just free write to get out of writer's block. Try to hear. When I hear, I can write, and the hearing is an internal hearing. I set up a super comfy space for myself. I usually sit on the floor when I'm writing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that kind of just feeling relaxed, feeling like going back to childhood, kind of that feeling really helps me get out of writer's block.
Yeah, that's so cool. Sometimes I like in the middle of the night, I'll like throw myself on the ground and be like, I have to write this thing out. And it just feels like you're a kid again, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, this feels natural. I love the floor. I love the floor so much.
So good.
Beautiful. And do you write with pen and paper or
Right.
laptop?
Both. Scripts with laptop. It's just
Okay.
easier to format that way. But I think like poetry for sure, pen and paper. Yeah.
Are you like particular about that? Like your writing utensils? Do you like how that feels? Like do you seek out like a right formula or anything?
Yes, I am very particular because, well, I don't like the feel of paper. I'd never liked the feel of paper since I was a kid. So I'm very particular. I used recycled paper. I use even used envelopes that have a rougher feeling, even art paper,
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a pet peeve.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, with actually pen, fountain pen. I love using
Fountain pens are amazing.
Yeah.
Like you mean ballpoint? Oh no, sorry, like the scratchy tips, right? I love those
Or
too.
smooth tips, depending on
Right.
what you want.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I don't know if I'm using them right. I got one when I was in school in New York, and I would write everything with it.
Yeah.
But then I realized I think I was using it like upside down
my
or something. So I was like literally scratching my
Oh,
paper,
dear.
but I loved it because it was like permanently etching in my thoughts.
Yeah.
Personally, I love like writing on erasers, and I know I would always do that as a kid. If I had a giant eraser to write on, I'd be so happy. And then like this nice quality like Japanese stationery.
Right. I've heard, I mean, Japanese
Oh,
have great
Where you have like a nice
stationery.
ink pen and it doesn't bleed through, and it's
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's a dream.
About like script writing and like because like that's maybe I could get some tips from you. I think like myself being a filmmaker, I want to dedicate more time to sitting and typing, but I find that it's never a comfortable space to do so, and I hate writing scripts like that. What do you do? Do you just like push through and do it, or what does it look like for you?
I don't know. Lots of times it goes back to just hearing the dialogue. So I mean, if you're not sitting down and writing it, hear the dialogue in your head, and then just go back and write it later, because like that, the dialogue, the voice, again, going back to voice, like the voice of the characters, and that's related to their personality, and that's related to their aims, and that drives the story. So like just going back to hearing who they are will really propel you to write the story, I find anyway. But everybody's approach is different, and one person's approach definitely doesn't work for somebody else.
logistic wise. Did you like just really like study the format, or do you use a program?
I do use a program. I learned the format from studying other scripts. Yeah.
Oh, nice. What program do you use?
I just use Celtics.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I used to use Celtics when it was free.
Yeah.
But then they started charging, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to use that. And then I went to go pay for another one. I think I use Final Draft.
Oh, nice.
Right? Is that a good one?
Yeah, that is. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. I paid for it with the intention of, I'm going to write my feature film. Haven't used it beyond the first day.
Oh man.
Oh no!
So
Just might as well give it over.
But I still have the software, so I will eventually get back to writing a script.
Yes, because I've like had the urge to, but then I'm like using Word, and I'm like this. I don't know. I could also study, like I look at the scripts, but it's just like to do the formatting, it gets in the way.
Yeah, it's the software just makes it quick. It just like you
Right.
just press tab, it goes to the, it just aligns things for you. It's much quicker. It's much easier. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
Oh,
We're both just bursting.
no,
through
go
questions.
for it. Go for it.
Okay, like for when you, I don't know, I hope this is, will segue nicely into your question, but let's say, like you said, like you hear the voice of a character. For your projects, have you found that like there will be, I suppose you spoke about it, like you were inspired by a person at iHuman, but maybe for your supporting characters, do you kind of like, do you find yourself really pulling from people in your life or from other works, and do you like take time to, because I know some writers will take time to like really dive into that character, like explore how they would act, how they would do different things, and they really like just like compile a whole list. Are you thorough, or do you just kind of, what's your approach with that?
I think it does depend on the character for me and the genre of the story. Like I'm writing a murder mystery now, and it's really
Cool.
important you get the details.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to know everything about the characters. You have to know where they place everything, because those are clues later on.
Right.
But I think for some films, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that amount of detail, but as long as you know what drives the character, I think that's what's important. And then some other stories are really just an exploration of the world more than the character themselves. So you don't need to go that deep, I think.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, my question was in that vein. I first off wanted to say, like, just hearing you, like, even when you were just describing now, like, the voice, you're like, oh, you got to find the voice. Like, that's what's important. It tied to, like, the idea you had said about, like, the mother word in the Bahá'í Faith. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. That it's just, like, manifest in, like,
You need, like,
you.
twinkle sounds.
Yeah.
Like, harp sounds, please.
I just, that was just a comment. Like, it was just cool. It's just cool to see that, like, you're, like, alive, you know? that I think what I was going to ask, well, I guess what I was going to ask was in the vein of like writing and the types of work that you are attracted to, and specifically about like what type of film, because I know like people either listening or watching might just be like slightly interested in like, oh, film or movies or shooting or video, but they maybe don't understand like the difference and depth of different projects. So like, I guess what type of film are you most interested in? And then what type of film would you like to eventually explore?
It's a good question. Like, I think I do write, and I'm developing different genres, different types of projects. And I think for me, like at the root of all of the stories is not so much like the kind of film, but again, what impact can it have? And I think that's kind of the central thread that runs through probably all of my projects, even the murder mysteries, even horror films. What impact will it have? What social issues can you explore? Or in the very least, like, will you be hiring a cast that's different than what you've normally seen on TV? So I think, like I'm working on an animation project right now, and that's my first animation project. I love animation. I watch animation all the time. So it doesn't really matter if it's an animation or a drama film or a documentary film. It's at the root of it. Will it have an impact? Is it in line with your beliefs about, what humanity needs to do to get past its current turbulence? Really, is how I would describe it.
Right. That's like pretty beautiful.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
That like again,
More,
it actually. Sorry.
I feel like more directors need to ask that question to themselves.
Definitely, because I think for them it's like, oh, I like drama narratives, and I'm gonna write this because it's gonna be like this beautiful drama thing, or I like horror, and it's like I want to scare people, and it's that's fine to like want to do that, but like a lot of people think that that alone will take you to like a good career in film, but what's even more like important is like why you're doing it. That and again, like it ties into what you were talking about the Baha'i faith, about this universality, about like it shouldn't matter what stream you're working in, it should matter why you're there. Right. That was yeah, okay, cool.
I mean, because with film, I don't know if you find this yourself, but you're so invested in a project for such a long time. If you're not truly motivated by the subject matter, or if something really doesn't grab your soul, and motivate you to finish the project, at the end, I think you'll burn out a little bit. It's hard work. Right. Every day is hard work. Yeah. Every phase of a project is hard work. So why are you doing it at the end of the day?
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's a very good question. Oh, I just wanted to like sit and think about that for a bit, but no.
I have a question. Like, I'm curious because when I've worked on set with you, I feel like you are a very like silent hard worker. Like you just give yourself, and I feel like there's no complaining. You're always just so
present,
exactly. And I feel like asking like what's your work ethic is kind of a tricky question. So if that is a weird question to answer, maybe like what is like the day life of like your routine? Like do you feel like you stick to a routine? And I do feel like writing a novel, like creating the work that you do, if you can just give some insight on your routines.
Well, I think like having projects, I'm a pretty project oriented person. When I have a project that I'm passionate about, that kind of informs my routine. Whenever I feel like I don't have something that draws me, that's when you'll find that I fall out of my routine, and I need to find it again. And when you fall out of it, it's so much harder to get back into it. I feel like you need to take the momentum and keep going forward. But I think like one thing that really informs my routine is I have, for my company, I have a document that I use every cycle, every quarter. with goals and aims. And then I kind of document, how I'm doing and what are my lines of action to get to those goals and aims. And then at the end of the cycle, I reflect on, like, what did we do? Where do we need to go for the next cycle? And that, working for my company, kind of informs what I need to do. And that's another Baha'i concept, working in a learning mode, working in cycles of action and reflection, and consultation is another key part of it. And I work with my mom, who's a producer. You'll see her on the credits for sure of all my films, and we consult together all the time, and that informs what we need to do in the next cycle.
Wow. You sound like you're
Yeah.
like you know what you're doing. I didn't mean that as an insult. I just, it means it's an insult to me. I don't know what I'm doing.
I think that's amazing that you mentioned that you do have like a document that you follow, because I feel like I have that for like my work. Like when I've worked for an organization before, you almost have like a professional development plan, and you have it. I don't even think we look at it quarterly though. It's more like twice a year. But I think quarterly would perhaps be more helpful. I look at it on a regular basis to like look at the timeline and see if I'm like following through on things. And I'm like, dang, why am I not doing this for my creative work? Yeah. Because it's crazy how time can just like 2 months pass and you're like, what was I supposed to do? Like, what were my goals?
Yeah.
So having like that document, is that like, where do you pick up that idea from?
That it came from, now I get to mention it, when I was in Israel, when I lived in Israel for 3 years, and I worked at, I got to serve at the Center for the Study of the Text, which is where the research department at the Baha'i World Center is. And our team used these documents, and I realized that some people were starting to use that in their life, to get through, to make sure that they're achieving their goals. And I thought, well, I mean, the company has to use this format. It works. Because not only does it help you achieve your goals, it helps you reflect on what you've done and kind of just feel okay about, like, either you feel that, I've done this so far. I can feel content. Yeah. And it helps you build every step of the way. Yeah.
Right. So many questions. When was it that first, will you be my life coach?
Same.
When did you go to Israel? Like, do you know what year that was, and how long were you there?
Oh man, years.
Yeah.
I was there for 3 years. I'll mention that. Almost 3 years, give or take. Yeah.
Is it beautiful there?
Israel is beautiful, and the Baha'i World Center is particularly beautiful because, it's kind of like an oasis in the desert. If you look at the pictures,
I think I've seen pictures of them. Yeah. Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's really striking, and it's just a beautiful environment to be in for that long.
And were you like living, like, did they have a campus, or was it like you were living on a separate residence?
Yeah, I lived in one of the buildings owned by the Baha'i World Center, just cool. Outside of the main center itself.
Wow, cool. Yeah. What's like the life there? It's probably such a different culture. It's like the Holy Land, the motherland. Yeah. Like what was that difference like living in Canada and living in there?
Oh boy, it's very different. Very different. And it's also different if you're at the Baha'i World Center than if you're just living in Israel generally, like, because there was kind of it's one community, and English was the main language that's used at the Baha'i World Center. So you kind of feel like you have a community immediately that you're entering into. So you don't feel that sense of like culture shock or trying to get used to another culture, because Baha'i culture, I guess you can describe it, is everywhere. So I'm used to it. And yeah, it was lovely living there, and also getting a chance to travel around Israel and see the Dead Sea and all these other sites. It's a beautiful country. It really is.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, like I feel with like film work, it's very character driven, more so than like, let's say photography. There's like people will gravitate towards landscape or architecture, people, portraits. What, like, besides like maybe people as a subject matter, are there, and your faith, what are some other kind of influences in the natural world?
Oh boy, a lot of things. You know, a lot of things can inspire you. It can just be the look of a park and just say, "Look, I want to set a film here." It can be. I was so inspired by London, for example. London, just the place, just the feel of it, the energy of it, and you kind of think, well, how can I translate that into a story? Inspiration can come from anywhere, really. It can also come from dreams. It can come from music, for sure. Usually the feelings that music stirs up in you, that can translate into a story too.
Very true.
There's a great quote from your film at the very end when they're the Baha'i community in Edmonton film, where at the very end they're communally singing and you have the instruments, and I can't remember what her name was, but the woman that they were interviewing has this great line at the end, and she says like music is like spiritual food.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, that is such a cool perspective.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it was nourishing for them. You know, they were there together for that communal experience. I really love that. Can I ask about the time in London? Like, where was that in relation to Israel? That before, after?
Before, yeah.
Oh, before. Okay.
And it was just a year and a half that I was there, and I feel like it had such an impact on my life, because really London's like, that's my dream city. I've always wanted to live there, and finally I got a chance to live there when I did my master's, and it was kind of everything that I had imagined, which is not usually the case. Usually there's the grass is greener on the other side. It is actually greener in England. Getting to go to theater, getting to watch live jazz shows and go to different markets and just walk and explore the history of the city. Yeah, it really inspired me in many ways.
Wow. Yeah. For those out there who like are thinking about studying abroad, like it sounds, based off what you've said so far, like your parents traveled a lot for work. So maybe that was a reason why you also decided, among other reasons, of wanting to explore. But I feel like at least a lot of people who are born and raised in Edmonton, or even just like maybe a less kind of metropolitan city, and maybe their parents never traveled much. Like, is there any advice or insights you can give with like, and you too, Gerardo, because you went to study in New York, but I don't think it's that common, at least in my upbringing. So for those who who are interested in that,
I think, I would say just have an open mind and just know you're going to have to shift the way that you live. You're going to have to shift your routines a little bit. Have an open mind and do research before you go. Like, if you already know these milestones or these different things that you want to do, it really helps you get acquainted with the city, and you won't feel so far from home. Yeah. But also, I'm lucky to have, my family that I can Skype, and it didn't feel like I was that far from them because we spoke all the time on Skype. And that was when my grandma was living, and I would call her all the time. So it didn't feel that far from them.
Was there a big time difference, London and Canada?
Yeah,
I don't even know.
Yeah. I would call at night, and that was the morning.
Okay, wow.
Canada, yeah.
I honestly don't know how people afford rent in London.
Yeah, isn't it like the most expensive place in the world?
Oh boy, yeah. So London and New York. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know too. But it was really expensive. I had a good flat that is student flat that also gives you privacy of.
You have to say that in the accent. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No.
I had a good flat. No,
Oh
sorry,
my
go
God.
ahead. The student flat. Yeah.
And then that was kind of why I could afford to live there for as long as I did, for sure.
Is it very small?
It was small. It was very small. Yeah, smaller than this room for sure, with a kitchenette and bathroom, just all compact.
Right.
Yeah. But then there's a big city out there to explore.
Very true.
Yeah, that's what I found is like it didn't matter where you were living per se, you were just out all the time anyways, right?
Yeah.
Whether it was school or, with friends and such.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, we didn't even really ask like what the master's was you studied there. So you'd finished your degree at the University of Alberta here in Edmonton, right? That was in, you said, psychology, and what was the minor?
And sociology.
Sociology?
Yeah.
And then was the choice to go to like London to do your master's right after, or?
I had a gap year. And I spent some time in New York. Actually, I was an intern with a Broadway producer for a bit there.
Wait,
wow.
What? What is going on here? What? Okay, wait.
That was a really short stint. But I love New York. And
where did you live?
Well, that's the thing. I kept having to move around because I couldn't find a flat in that apartment, and that was what made it so short. And so I had a gap year working in New York for that producer, but also working from Edmonton for that producer when I couldn't find an apartment.
I see.
But I guess that was my first intro to producing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know you lived in New York. That's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Where did you what area did you live in? I'm just curious now because I live there.
Well, uptown. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
But
nice.
Again, had to move around too many times.
Isn't it brutal to move around in the city?
It's terrible.
I only moved once, and I remember taking all of my belongings in 2 big pieces of luggage, and I was like, I'm not going to pay for a taxi. I'm going to use the subway. Absolutely horrendous. Took me 3 hours in snow, and I'm just with all these. And the worst thing is, it's not like transit here in the city, where it's it's easy, you can easily get in and out. You can carry a freaking sofa through it all. No, there's big stanchions and gates, and it's a nightmare. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's I feel your pain.
Yeah. That's why I feel in Japan, when they push people into the train carts, sardines are literally have to be pushed in. And I had my luggage with me, and I got so squished, and I was elbowed in multiple places. It was fine though, but
yeah. I don't want to stay on New York too long, but what was your favorite place to go eat?
To go eat?
Dollar Pizza?
Well, no. I love hot dogs.
Yeah.
Just on the street, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, but there's a place, wow, they did a great Lux, and I can't remember the name of that place.
Sorry, Lux?
Yeah, a Lux bagel.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'll let you know.
If you know the name, I might know.
Yeah, Salmon Lux. I'm gonna send it to you later.
Oh,
man,
do.
that place was good.
Yeah. No, I pretty much lived off of dollar pizza and the $5 halal meal carts. Oh, those were so good. Lamb and rice and vegetables, white sauce, red sauce.
I got food poisoning from the one I went to.
No way. That's rough.
Yeah. I think it all depends. You have to be careful.
I mean, yeah, it's street food, right?
That's
anything
true.
Could go wrong, but
yeah, pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane.
For someone who isn't familiar with the film world, what exactly are some roles or responsibilities that producers do? I feel it's kind of a mysterious job.
Wait, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt that. Can we just pause that? I like that question. Actually, I wanted to ask that exact question, but I don't think we touched on exactly what your master's was. I kind of danced around that.
Yes.
I'm sorry. That was my bad.
Maybe she doesn't want to talk about it.
I can mention it quickly. I did my master's in the Department of Crime Science, looking at counterterrorism.
So you're a counter-terrorist?
Not quite. I studied to be one. I didn't become one. I went into film after, but yeah, that was my study.
Film is a form of counterterrorism.
Exactly.
If you think about it. Yeah.
That's right.
And it makes sense, I feel, because you were talking about making a crime story. So I'm not sure how much of that informs the current work.
I really draw on both the psychology and the crime science when I'm writing scripts, for sure.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, I do.
sorry, what like sparked you to make that specific decision about the masters? Like, why that one?
Boy, it seems so random now when I think about it. I think I had applied for a bunch of law schools. And it was like, well, this sounds more interesting than becoming a lawyer. And I said, if I do get into this program, I'm going to go for it. It just sounds so intriguing. I got into the law schools and then this one came at the end, and I was living in Trinidad, and I remember seeing it and I thought, okay, I'm going to go for this. And it was a great experience. It was a great experience to learn about something that really it's kind of elusive. People don't know a lot about counterterrorism. And then I got to write, a dissertation at the end of my degree. But then after that, I realized, it's if I want to change the world and I want to really counter terrorism and I want to counter organized crime, which were the two areas that we looked at in the master's degree, then I prefer to get to the root cause of those problems. And that's why I shifted gears after my master's. I didn't go in and practice crime science. Yeah.
Wow. Like, I don't think I've ever even met or heard of somebody that has studied that. It's just like, to me, it's super impressive.
Yeah.
What was like your coursework? Like, what sort of courses would you be taking for this master's?
Well, one of my favorite one was intelligence gathering and analysis, theories of terrorism, theories of organized crime. And then there were all these research methods classes, to help write the dissertation. It was pretty diverse, again, because people approached crime science through different fields. So there were actually engineers in my class, or there were people focused on, money laundering. So really different backgrounds. I came at it from a psychology background, but it was interesting to see that people had really different dissertations at the end. And at the end, I ended up focusing on state terrorism, which I thought, well, it's losing popularity in the academic space to even talk about state terrorism. And but it claims more lives than insurgent terrorism. So that's what I ended up focusing on, and in particular about Iran. But I won't go into too many details there.
Sure. I mean, we don't have to dive into that. I feel like that could be a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast
in of itself. But isn't that where you wrote your book?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Can you just describe what that is and what was it like?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the book is called State Terrorism in Iran. And again, it looks at the Baha'i community. My mom is a Baha'i from Iran, and her family members and herself have been under persecution in Iran since the beginning of the faith, but much worse after the Islamic Revolution. And so what I looked at is trying to understand how the Islamic regime in Iran uses terrorist tactics to intimidate the Baha'i population, but also the general population from actually supporting the Baha'i population. So yeah, that's the book is available online, and you can catch that if you would like to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. So okay, wait, let's just try to like recap here before we go forward. So you're a writer, director, producer, a spy.
No.
You're an author. You have a master's degree. You lived in London and Trinidad and Israel. And
New
Toronto
York,
and Quebec.
too.
And New York.
Quebec.
In between that, when you had like spare time. Oh my God. How do you not talk about all this all the time? Every time someone like barely mentions New York, I'm like, oh, I went there. I went to film school in New York. Yeah, what do you want to know? What do you want to know? For 1 year. And you've like, sorry, I'm just in awe. Yeah.
It is a confusing timeline to keep in your head, and I'm not good at talking about years. I don't remember years. So that's probably why I don't speak very much.
Maybe that's a great segue to Emily's question, which I interrupted with all of that. But yeah, I don't know if you want to ask it again.
Oh, yes. Like maybe because I feel like people kind of can grasp what it means to be a director and a writer, but can you talk about what it means to be a producer, and if you feel comfortable talking about your mom being a producer, maybe how that maybe influenced how you became one as well?
Well, I mean, there's different types of producers, but the producer is there kind of from the beginning of the project all the way to the end to its distribution. So it's with the project for the longest amount of time, and that's a lot of responsibility. But I think some of the roles that a producer plays is raising money for a project, overseeing the creative without getting too involved in it. After the film is making sure that the film is made according to the budget, according to the timeline, adjusting the budget and timeline as necessary, and dealing with all those logistical aspects, and then seeing the film through to its festival circuit and later on its distribution. So yeah, it's very involved, that job, I think, and that's why my mom is so good at it, because she's so much smarter than me, and she can keep all those elements in her head. Whereas I do like to focus on one thing at a time, but she can see the whole picture. And she's great at managing budgets. So
yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
That's so helpful. That's kind of the crazy thing. I think what intrigues me a lot about you. Sorry, I didn't mean to override the question, because you asked about other roles, right?
No, just the producing, and I think eventually I'd like to ask also about distribution, because I think a lot of filmmakers are curious about that. You've had some success with being in festivals, but we can digress.
You know what? Maybe we should stay on that tangent. I totally lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. But if you want to talk about your experience with distribution and how you've approached submitting your work, if it was successful at the start, if you've had some setbacks, and things that you've noticed that have worked or haven't worked.
I think start early. By no means I'm not an expert in that. But start early. I mean, even before you make your project, you should be thinking about how it's going to be distributed and how it's going to be marketed. I think maybe that's a little bit of a shortfall in Edmonton, where not everybody is considering the business aspects of filmmaking, and it's really important, because you want to sustain the career, you want to continue doing what you love to do. So I think with my lyric I Never Knew, for example, that got to CBC and a few festivals, I started early. I went to a CBC roundtable that came to Edmonton, and I met Paige Murray there, and she was in charge of Canadian Reflections at the time. And I told her about the project. So that was even before I made the film. I was still revising the script, and I sent her the script and some of the other materials, and they weren't pre-licensing at the time, but I had that connection. And then later on, when the film was completed, I could work with them around the festival window to get the film on CBC. And I think, if you really are considering who is your market, which broadcaster or which platform will help you reach your market earlier on, I think it will help you at the end of the film. So there's not just this huge gap where you have a completed product and you don't know what to do with it. Now you have to scramble and find a broadcaster or a distributor. So I'm talking about shorts anyway. With a long film, with a feature film, you need to get that broadcast license anyway, kind of to finance your film earlier on anyway.
Wow. Actually, kind of in that vein, I had a question. My mind's sputtering. I'm not gonna pretend.
How are we doing for time?
Let's see. I don't know.
Let's see. How are you feeling, Naz?
I'm good. My voice is a little scratchy, but other than that,
Okay.
I'm
You can
good.
take some
I'll just
water.
grab-
That's fine.
Yes, we need to like have house rules at the start because it's like, yeah, we need to take a
I
break.
know.
We just talk for like
We
10
just
hours
Go
straight.
for it.
Not 10 hours.
Okay, wait. Let me find that thread because that was like super intriguing. You're talking about distribution, thinking about it, projects. Oh, you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the question that was popping into my mind was like, like as an artist. First of all, do you see yourself as an artist?
I think I see myself equally as a business person and as an artist. Yeah.
Right.
I do think that even if you are an artist, it really does help to have some background in the business side of filmmaking.
Yeah, I think that was like going to be my other question is like, what do you feel is the balance of that in your life? Because it seems like you're equal parts as like, spur of the moment creative artist and also just thought out practical person, and that's really in all of like any film school. That's essentially what they're teaching you is to like manage that balance because most people think I'm going to go become an artist, and it's the reality is like, oh, you need money to do everything. And so in your own work, like say project to project, does that like balance change? Like, do you feel, oh, with this project, I just want to do it because I love it. And it doesn't matter where the money's coming from or who's going to see it. I got to make this.
Right.
Or are there, what is the balance there from project to project?
I think for me, again, I think from project to project, it does differ. But I think when I write a script, I do try and put I do kind of take my producer hat off if I can. Like again, going back to creating a comfy space for myself and being more childlike in writing a script in the development stage. That comes from a time when I wasn't so systematic and I did make decisions spur of the moment, and my imagination was so full compared to what now that you have other concerns. But I think I think when I'm in development, you have to be the artist, you have to be the creator. But then when you write the next draft, you finish the first draft, write the next draft, you have a new hat to put on. And if you can't do that, then I would just recommend finding a partner that can balance your artistic side, because at the end of the day, there's too many artists getting ripped off, or their work doesn't get due attention because they don't know how to distribute their work. So I think that's really important. And my mom definitely, I work with my mom, Mitra Knight. She does have that other side to balance me out, because she is a project director by trade. That's her job, and she knows how to do it really well. So even when I forget how to be a producer, she doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Can your mother be my
Yeah.
manager
Taking clients.
/ coach?
Yeah.
Oh God, so cool. Yeah, I mean, in my own life, I felt like my instinct has always been to be that artist, to be that child painting and creating, and like it's kind of been a harsh reality of like, oh, the child needs money, I need to find funding for the things I want.
Yeah.
I think a lot of me still hangs on to like, oh, I still want to do things because I love them and my heart's in them, and that regardless of what money's spent and who sees it, that I'm going to be pouring myself into it.
Yeah.
I kind of want to always keep that. But like the bigger reality is like, that won't really matter unless there's a way for people to see it.
Yeah.
And if you're not thoughtful about that, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why I love your approach and hearing your background and how thought out you are, and that even like that document you were talking about, which you must send a PDF to me afterwards.
Yeah, like
please.
I want to acknowledge that like you've gone to places and like found these resources and knowledge, and I'm not sure how open these documents are, but I think it would be helpful to have like a template for people. And I'm not sure, maybe you share that with the people part of 1844. But I think that's just so wonderful.
Yeah. Are you open to that?
I'd be happy to share. Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of it's based on the documents that we used to use at the World Center, but it's kind of my own invention. What works for me, like it helps me I do the accounting for the company on one side, having the goals there, documenting the new contacts that I've made in the cycle, and then looking at reflection. So yeah, happy to share anything that I've learned. If it works for you, it doesn't work for everybody, but
Sure, yeah.
it might work.
Yeah, that'd be a great resource to like link to whoever's listening or watching.
Sure, yeah.
That might be
of course,
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to donate to this wonderful production company, that would also be welcome.
Oh yeah.
I think people are having a hard time with COVID, but this is sounds like such a wonderful document, and I hope people definitely look up your studios after and support your studio, because based off your mission value, I'm not sure if you want to talk more about it too, or if we covered a few points. It sounds like we need more creative production companies like this.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, and you can always reach out to me. You can find me on social. If you want to think about other projects, just ask me about the approach here. I'd be happy to help in any way.
Excellent.
Yeah, and if I could just vouch for her, I got to work on set. Actually, all three of you. Well, two of you, three of you, including myself.
Fluffy.
Oh yes,
Yes.
Fluffy
Yeah.
on the carpet here. The
Has he been
beautiful
on
big
set?
dog.
Oh yeah, he's in my lyric. I never knew. He has a
Yes, it's
cameo
the little
there.
girls chasing him and playing with
Yeah.
him. That's so cool.
Does he have a long tail? Because that's dangerous on set. I've been on set and there's a dog just whips
Oh,
whips
no.
the stand over.
No, bobtail. So
Aw.
yeah.
Oh, nice.
No, he was actually not feeling that well that day, and then the camera rolled, and he was on it.
Yeah.
He really, the show must go on for him.
He knows
Yeah.
the industry.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good.
Yeah.
We need a cut too.
I'm gonna get some B-roll
yes.
of him for sure. Just chilling and sleeping. What I don't even remember what I was asking. I got totally
man.
Oh
derailed.
dear.
Fluffy.
Yeah.
Is her dog, by the way, in case we need to provide contact.
That's what it. It's like we're talking about a human being.
Very cute sheepdog. Majestic.
So actually, I mean, maybe it's cool to spend a little time kind of looking forward to what you feel you and your studio would like to look like, say, in 5 years, or if there are any kind of larger projects you would like to have under the umbrella of the studio.
Well, I mean, we have a few things in development now. One is a historical feature film, and I think that's something that within 5 years, that's something that we would want to work on and get that made, if possible. I mean, 5 years is a short timeline for a complex feature film, but I think that's something that we would want to work on. And we do have a few projects in development. I won't speak too much about them, but I can say that a personal goal of mine would be one day to be a showrunner, to work on a series as a showrunner, and that's something that we're working towards as well. Yeah.
Nice. So are you kind of in tune with? Sorry, are you in tune with the modern climate of how we take in media and where we're watching movies, all of these streaming sites? And are you kind of oh, that's where I see my spot, or I see what this show is doing and I'd like to do that? Is that kind of where you're at now, or how do you perceive that?
Well, I try to follow along. Yeah, I try to follow along. And I mean, I'm always interested with what the streamers are doing. I'm more interested with how they started off, because they were really opening space for kind of mid-level production companies to get their films out there. I don't think that's how it's going to be going forward. I think it's going to become more like the studio system. Yeah, I would be interested to see what digital platforms swoop in to cover that space. Yeah. But where would I see my work? I mean, it depends. I would love for the historical feature film to have a theatrical release. And I guess we'll see what happens to theaters after COVID. I mean, the outlook is not particularly good. But I would love for that to happen. And I do see it, I see it kind of, because it's similar in tone to some of the films that I see on Amazon, for example. You know, ideally, God willing, that would be where I would see that film.
I can see it happening.
Oh.
And like, what are some like demands, if you could like talk to the heads of the film industry, like what are some demands or supports do you think like should be made available?
I think well, that's a very interesting question. I think, there's a lot of things opening up now. I don't know if you saw that Netflix had a pitch day for Canada, for example. I mean, that's a really great way for people with unsolicited scripts to go directly to the producer and directly to the production company, to the studio, my bad, and get them to see your work. But I think there's a system of gatekeepers for sure, that are very difficult to get past. I think, especially, people from underrepresented groups, it's very difficult to navigate your way through those systems of gatekeepers. Working with an agent or a manager, for example, if you're just a pure writer, that's not an easy thing to get an agent or manager attached, even to be able to pitch to studios or other production companies. So I think that's something that I think everybody is aware of, and I don't know what the solution will be. I think that part of the solution will be production companies, mid-range production companies really stepping up to look at IP from people from underrepresented groups, because but that's something that's very difficult in a risk-adverse industry. I think that's been kind of the problem. But the industry is opening. There's mandates now for, that are coming into place. The Academy had new mandates for the selection criteria.
How do you feel about that, by the way?
I think it's necessary now. I wish it wasn't necessary. I wish it wasn't necessary, but it kind of is, because when films by people from underrepresented groups, marginalized groups, have typically less funding and support for them to begin with, well, how would they contend with films that get just money thrown at them? Right. How can you work in a star system where the stars are usually white, male, that get paid more, but you're looking to attach new talent from, for example, a black actor from Canada? Like, how do you even contend with those major films? So I think those mandates are necessary now. I think in the future they won't be necessary anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to that specific thing about the Oscars, I know there's a lot of, I guess, backlash. It seems like the stars and those gatekeepers themselves are the ones that are like, oh, well, this, it's not showing like the good work coming to the top. It's like we're just giving a leg up to people who might need it, right? And I feel like even if it does look like that, first of all, I don't think that's the case at all. I think if you were giving people the opportunity to make amazing film, and they're not from, they're not in that gatekeeper community, that you would have amazing work come out, right? So although it looks like it's like, we're going to help the BIPOC community out, I think if anything, it's like, it just has to look like that, and has to be kind of awkward so that good projects can get up there. You know what? Yeah. I think overall it's a good thing. I read a quote about a director, the Mexican director Cuarón, who's won, a lot of stuff recently, and he's like, oh yeah, it's like, it doesn't, I don't think he meant it this way, but he kind of sounded snooty. He was like, it doesn't like let the cream of the crop, like the best films rise to the top. But I'm like, everything you make can get funded, like, shut up. Like there's the point is like people don't even have the opportunity to do what you do. And that's the point, right? Yeah. So I see it as like a benefit, no matter how it looks, no matter if it's like let's help out the BIPOC community and it's kind of like the white hand saving whatever. I think it's a good thing,
Yeah, no, I agree. And another thing that I see as a good thing, I was watching TIFF online this year, cool. And had a chance to see some of the panel discussions and a few other events where different distributors were mentioning the economic value of having diversity in your film and the way that you can reach a wider audience. And I think when people see dollars and cents behind a good thing, then real change will happen much quicker.
Right.
Yeah. So that's I saw that as a real improvement in the discussion, ongoing discussion about diversity and inclusion in the industry.
That's a great point. There's like so many stories about, I don't want to sound critical, but like the coming of age story about like a white teenage boy, which is fine, it's valid, but like there are so many, and how many can you count of like other stories? And it doesn't even have to be like stereotypical, but just having like this story that is a normal, like it could be any sort of human, and the race behind it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just like seeing yourself on screen, because I feel like growing up, like when do you see people on screen that look like you?
Right.
I'm not sure if there's an actor that you can reflect on, or any sort of actors that you really admire. But there isn't that. I think it's becoming a lot better now, especially with TV and different series. But like in the 90s, it's a very sort of targeted market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like you had role models to look up to growing up like that? Like people in film where you were like, oh, that kind of looks like me.
I don't think I had, I don't think people in film were so much my role models. I remember in music, it was because music is a lot more diverse. I think in music I did have people that I was really inspired by. I wouldn't say look up to, because you don't know who they are.
That's true.
You're very wise even as a young person.
I can't utter my words sometimes how I want them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely from music, for sure. But I think some of the shows that I'd been watching lately, and I see like for example, Little Fires Everywhere. I don't know if you saw that show, Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon.
Okay.
And I just remember thinking, wow, okay, they both have equally important parts. It's a woman-led show, and they both have the same amount of like screen time, and their stories are just as interesting, completely different, just as interesting. And I remember thinking, well, that's different. I'd love to see more of that.
Are there other shows and movies you feel are kind of doing that same thing?
Wow. Well, I think Watchmen was a great one, wasn't it?
Okay, I didn't actually see it, but I heard it was great.
Yeah, with Regina King.
Regina King's good.
Yeah, she's great. And I don't know if you saw her film One Night in Miami, which I think it premiered at TIFF.
Really?
And that was her directorial debut.
Whoa.
Wow.
So I mean,
I gotta watch
if you
that.
think
One Night in Miami.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah. And you think, well, someone who's been in the industry that long, and that was her directorial debut, and you think, well, yeah, there are definitely barriers when you think about it, because someone who has power, who has a name, who could she has so much experience, she has such a clear vision, and that was just her debut this year, 2020.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that. But what an amazing film. Yeah, definitely recommend it.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm just dumbfounded and starstruck.
I kind of have like a silly tangent I want to take, but maybe I don't know. Maybe not yet.
Does it have to do with the music?
Yes, it does.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of musicians and
Yeah.
inspiration.
Oh my gosh.
Well, okay, so I won't play any of it or make you
Good.
do that, although it's so good.
No.
So, for listeners and viewers, I had come across some wonderful music by our dear Naz on YouTube, and I think that's kind of where you started. It was this channel, if anyone wants to go see it.
No, don't say the name.
Okay, I won't. But I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But there's, I think 9 years ago, you started doing, I think there's a couple like demos, originals, and then some covers.
Oh yeah.
I heard
That's
the
true.
cover that I listened to, just 1 second. I'll bring it up so that if anyone wants to search it up and listen, they can.
I'm sure it's wonderful.
It is. Oh, so it's no, sorry. Wait,
You're
wait.
hard on yourself. I feel like
Here
you're
we
hard
go.
on yourself.
So it was a YouTube cover of "Don't Rain on My Parade," and boy, is it good! It was like I should play a little bit.
No.
Okay, I won't.
People can find it.
So I guess my question here is, where does music fit into your artistic output? Is that still an influence? Do you go back to it, or was that kind of formative years?
Well, gosh, I love music. I think I wrote a lot of songs too, and I think probably one of my first artistic influences was Michael Jackson. He's just, I don't want to get into anything other than his music and his performance. I just realized like how much he gave his full soul every time he was on the stage in every performance, and like I just wanted to do that. And I started I wrote music, and I started learning about music production again. That's what I did at iHuman there. and I had written a whole album.
Whoa.
And I was recording it myself, and lost my voice in the middle of recording that album, and now I can't really sing anymore. Even when I speak, it's not the full sound of my voice.
Whoa, no, really?
And yeah, it was around the time Michael Jackson had passed away.
Whoa.
That I kind of lost my singing voice, and I thought, well, it's a sign, you know. I still love writing. This is not the way that I should go. Of course, I don't think I took it as lightly and with as much wisdom as I can see it now, but that I went more into writing, and from there I started writing scripts. But kind of, I just remember being so fascinated by the influence of musical theater in Michael Jackson's work, and film noir, and really stylistic kinds of films. And I think I found a lot of different genres through Michael Jackson.
Wow.
So yeah, I really was inspired by his work.
So you lost your voice. How did that happen?
You know, it's still a mystery to me, and yeah, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. And still when I speak, I can still feel the effects. It's not very comfortable to speak. It's not, and I think, but being more quiet, I think it has helped me in a lot of other ways.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
No
Yeah.
worries, yeah.
I mean, it's still, honestly, like I'm getting like emotional right now because it goes back to that idea of like that voice.
Yeah.
And then even further back to like that mother voice, that mother word.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, I can't make sense of it just from what you said, but it just kind of like stunned me when you said you'd lost your voice, and then in your writing and in your artwork, you went to go find that elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know? And I just maybe it hit me because like I've reflected a lot on my life and my artistic path, and I've always thought, oh, is this worth it? You know, am I making films? And I'm not as well thought out as you. Like I'm very much like, I gotta do it or I'm gonna die. That's literally my output.
Yeah.
Right. Emily and I had a project we were gonna get to, which we were talking to you about, and you know, we didn't. Plans have kind of been postponed, and my heart hurt. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I wanted to go do it. You know.
We had started out as like a photography project, and then it dived into this pretty, I think, ambitious film project.
Yeah.
So I was like, we need to think this through.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the best thing is to like step back and evaluate. But I only bring it up to say, like, my own disposition can get so blindsided by like the passion of doing that I'm not well thought out. But I always question in my own self, like, how valuable is my own voice? Because I think in those terms as well. What am I saying? How am I saying it? What from my experiences am I bringing into my artwork, and why is that important, right? Why am I saying this thing about this person in this moment? And I've been obviously thinking about that a lot, but I think more than not, I can get into modes of like just beating myself up and being like, oh, you should be doing something better with your time. You should be like, art isn't as valuable right now in your life because you know what? You don't have a job. You're not helping people. You're not doing this, that, and the other.
That's far from it, though. I mean, how much does art change people? How much does it can save lives? It really can. You see it all the time, and not only that, I think it just changes the way that people see the world that they live in, and it can change the way that they want to see the future, and that bears in their actions today. So I think,
I'm getting emotional.
I know, it's so beautiful. Oh, I'm sorry. We're just like
we're just sobbing. Oh.
Yeah.
From the beauty. Ooh.
That's well put.
I think, one of those famous lines from a movie, I think that I remember, just it kind of it took me back, and I started thinking about it, was in the King's Speech, where he says, "Because I have a voice," and he screamed that out, and the character playing opposite him was pushing him to his limits, and then he says, "Why does this bother you?" He says, "Because I have a voice."
Wow.
Or why should I get up from this chair? And he said, "Because I have a voice." And I think that the amount of emotion that was in that line is something that is a major moment in a film for me that really made me reflect on. Sorry, Fluffy is snoring, isn't he?
That's okay. That's okay.
We can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that made me realize in my writing that's how I have a voice, and I think that's the same with every artist. It doesn't have to be writing; it can be with a paintbrush, it can be with a microphone. You have a voice, and you're contributing to society in such an important way. I think it's important to think about that.
Right. No, thank you for that encouragement. That's huge. Especially hearing it from someone like practical and like thought out and balanced like yourself. It's like, okay, yeah, there is value to like what I feel on my side is sometimes this manic, crazy way of life. Yeah.
It's like a very empowering mantra, like, because I have a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think sometimes you get down, like you'll have like a setback and you kind of operate on a more silent mode. I feel like sometimes when I'm feeling low, I will like definitely retreat. And it's important to remind yourself, like, are you speaking up? Are you advocating for yourself? It's not something that is taught. I was having this conversation with a friend, and like, it's rarely are we like taught to like advocate for ourselves and advocate for others and to speak up. And then just like being conscious about if we are being loud, like, are we making space for the other voices?
Yeah, I think that's especially important for women. I think women are really kind of brought up in a society that that teaches you not to share your voice, and that's that robs the society of half of the stories, at least, and if we're talking about film worlds, half of the stories that need to get told, and that's just not right. It's not right. I think, even if you're a quiet person, there's a way to share what's on your mind and to advocate for other people, and yourself as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think like yeah, it's probably like a wonderful place to wrap up. I don't know if anything you had anything else to say or anything else to
No, just thank
query
you.
about.
Like, thank you for including me in this.
Oh, of
It's
course.
just been sometimes I don't remember my whole story, and you've really dug deep and found it. And just thank you for the opportunity to share and to learn from you guys too.
Oh, of
Oh,
course.
thank
Yeah.
you. I
Yeah.
feel so enriched from this conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of other people will too. So thank you.
Thank you
Yes.
guys. Thank you.
I knew that when we like decided to do this, I was like, I've seen her on set, amazing work ethic. I've seen her work. I'm like very impressive for like just starting out, and I just knowing her disposition, I was like, this is gonna be good. But this conversation has exceeded all of my expectations in so many ways. I want to like go back and listen, and there's really good stuff there. I wanted to end on a kind of final note. No, I mean, like just discussing your faith and how it manifests through your work and everything kind of you put your work and your life to. I can see that you're very thoughtful about your art, thoughtful in how it impacts people around you, and that it's not, that is not like a selfish endeavor. You care so much to bring people alongside you as well. And all I wanted to like kind of end on was I think actually I had written a small little quote from again the Baha'i of Edmonton film. And I think it was the same woman talking about the kind of the circles. About they were playing music, and she was at the very end. She says something along the lines of, although we get together and we pray, it doesn't always have to be just like a kind of close your eyes outward prayer. Like that can look like many ways. And so she said, it could be like playing music or getting together and eating food. And she's like, she put it just very simply, like your actions and like what you do can be turned into prayer. And honestly, just like sitting here, hearing all of your experiences, I see that is who you are. It's about like the prayers that you enact aren't just like empty words. It's like you live it, you act it, and you do it. And that is incredibly inspiring for me, especially like right now in my own life. I'm just like, I have this thing, like I got to go do. And then sometimes I'm like, but why? And you know what? Like just seeing yourself, that could be as simple as like a prayer. That's really inspirational. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. Wow, that's making me emotional. So thank you.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. I have nothing more. I'm pretty sure we could sit here and like talk way more.
Yes.
I think there's so much, but you've been an incredible inspiration. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Again, she is a great writer, director, producer, spy, anthropologist, psychologist, author. It keeps getting incredible.
Scientist. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to the things to come of you and your studio. And I hope you will consider me in all of your projects from now on.
Thank you.
In perpetuity, and I'll sign a contract.
Both of you. Yeah.
Other than that, I think we're good to go. Was there anything else left to bring
I
up?
guess we can plug in her contact or her website. But did you want to mention anything about that?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you can find 1844 Studios at www.1844studios.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Or you can find me, Nauzanin Knight. I'm on all the platforms as well. Although I use Facebook the most. So
okay.
Yeah, old school.
Very cool. Well, Naz, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for opening up your home and your space and your experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No problem. And with that, I guess we'll sign off and say goodbye.
Goodbye and
Bye,
good
everybody.
vibes.
Bye.